All right. Hello, everybody. I thought I'll show you a little bit of images and of the process of my work before we get on a conversation together. But sometimes it's just easier for me to take you through the strange journey that took me to be an artist. And that's why my latest book is called Artist Until I Find a Real Job, because I really never imagined what it was to be an artist. I didn't know there was museum or galleries. I didn't do any art education. So it came pretty spontaneously. And at the time, this was on the Champs-Élysées when I was 17. I would actually paste my photos in those frames that I would make myself. And then, of course, as you can see, they would remove my photos, but the frame would stay. And so I would go back and paste them again. But I think at the time, what really took me to become an artist was when I took my friend in photo. And he was holding his video camera like a gun. And I took that photo in the project outside Paris. And then we didn't know what to do with the photo. And so that was the first time that I actually enlarged it. And so there you can actually see the technique that I discovered that exact same night of like unrolling rolls of paper to actually create the image. And of course, this was totally illegal. The mayor sued me. And but because I'm just JR, he had a hard time, finding me. And that's one of the reasons of what I'm doing, of staying kind of semi-anonymous, because he's still the mayor today, so he could still technically find me. But that's a longer story. But what happened is that actually, if you remember the riots that exploded in France in 2005, there was really large riots, maybe the largest riots we had since the French Revolution. I know we have many riots in Paris, so please, no comment. But those ones were, they started in front of that image. So at 19 years old, I was on the cover of New York Times, the actual front page, not for my work, but for being the backdrop of the largest riots we've had. And so at that moment, I think when the press came to me and said, can you take photos of the riots? And I said no, and I started taking portraits. I think that's the very moment where, without realizing it, I decided to be an artist. And small story on the side, 20 years later, my friend made his first movie, and he was nominated for an Oscar, and it's called Les Misérables, and had a huge success. So it's also both a crazy story. And then I went around the world, and this was, anywhere I would see wall, and anywhere I haven't been, which means the rest of the world, because I had never traveled, I would go and paste photos of people. This was in Israel and Palestine. I photographed people doing the same job and paste them together, but doing the same job from either side, like two taxi drivers, one from Palestine, one from Israel. And I would make them play the caricature of how the other one sees them, and I would paste them together. And actually, I would ask people who is who. And people would say, of course I can recognize my brother from my enemy. And they would often get it wrong. So I would continue and paste more. And we did this in 8 Israeli cities and Palestinian cities. That was exactly the year when they built the wall. And actually, there was, when I pasted this one, the nuns came and recognized the priest and came and gave a hand. So at that time, I was only 21, and I was like, oh, wow, art is actually, pretty cool. And, I got kicked out and evicted from the country, but still, I had an amazing time before they did that. And then I went in Brazil. I started a project called Women Are Heroes, and I pasted photos of women on the whole community in Brazil so that suddenly the hills would have eyes. And I kept on doing that project all over, and this was on the stairs. This was the first time that I started doing anamorph. So really walking in the community was for me, like I had to spend 24 days in that community that is still today very violent, and is the first favela of Brazil. And I had to learn on how to walk with the community. And that was really, that's really my learning process, because I was maybe just 22 or 23 at that time. And 15 years later, we still have a school there, and I kept on walking in that community. So to also observe the long-term period into project started at those very moments, a very important part of my process. This was in Kenya. People there noticed, they were like, did you miss something on that image? And I was like, no, you just gotta wait a tiny bit and something will happen. And then a day later, the train arrived. And then as the train passed, it would actually connect. But the train never stopped. So, you know, I always remember some guy coming back with the groceries, walking back home, and he never saw it because he didn't turn around. That also showed me what it is to exhibit in the public space, is that, you know, you take people by surprise, and sometimes they miss the surprise, and that's fine. And then I started doing more, playing with architecture, thinking, okay, where there's no wall, where can I build them? And in this process, anything's possible. And so that was during the Olympic. I was putting people that were not selected for the Olympics, that came from places where they didn't have the same chance. And so I started realizing, okay, the city is an incredible canvas, but I can go beyond buildings. This is a small museum we have in Paris. I don't know if you heard about it. It's called the Louvre, but each time I travel, I try to bring, you know, a culture with us. And they let me do a project on the pyramid. And at that time, when they told me that, I thought this museum was only for dead people or dead artists, you know? So I was like, okay, I've never thought of an idea. And so I came there to see the pyramid to try to find an idea. And most of the people that would travel from around the world to go see the pyramid, they would arrive and turn their back to the pyramid to take a selfie. I was like, that's interesting. So let me make the pyramid disappear. So the pyramid is actually there, but we pasted the building on the back in front of it. And then they invited me again 3 years later. I was like, okay, you sure? And so I had to find another idea. So I was like, maybe I'll make the pyramid appear this time. And so that's the size of one person you see here. But it's this old paper, the exact same process that I showed you before, except we had 400 people every day to help paste this over 5 days. And the beauty of this is that when we actually opened it to the public after a week, as people walked on it, it disappeared under their feet. And the ephemerality of the work is what I work on, because you would think that that's the artwork, and yes, that's what stays, that's what, that's the image that ends up in museums or collections, but the process of making the work is the art. And that's what I want to show you today. This was another small monument we have in Paris called the Eiffel Tower. That was right after COVID, so this is a pretty recent one. During COVID, actually, a lot of the museums were closed, so I started making those installations on museums so you could see the inside of the museum. And so this was in Italy. I did a couple of the museum there to kind of reveal through cracks. This one, they were supposed to have it for 3 months, and they kept it almost a year and a half. They just turned it down last month. But that's it. Here you see, because the printer was not working well, you see the strips. And the reason why I want to show you that is because with those strips, there's so much you can do. And of course, it would be so easy to do it, and I could have done that same image just with a tarp, and it would have taken 5 minutes. But it's how long is the process, how complicated it is, that makes it interesting. Because it shows you how many people you can involve and how many interactions you can actually create. So this was in Egypt. They let me do something at the pyramid. And they also, I don't know why, re-invited me. So the second time I actually built a pyramid there, but I'll show you that later. The project I want to show you today was at this border between Mexico and US. And I'm showing you this project because it kind of, I could have taken any project and depict it to you, but I chose 2 very different projects to show you how an idea comes and how I don't really control necessarily the outcomes, but there's a certain pattern in each time. When you're an artist and you work with walls and outdoor, people always tell you there's a wall here, there's a wall there. They always want to send me in some of the places where I get killed. That's what I hear every day. But this one between US and Mexico, I never thought of it because you can see through. So I'm like, I can't paste on this. But when I started working with scaffolding, I decided, no, let me go there and actually see. And I was looking for a place where I could go, but you could go, which means that there would be a road. So I went all along this is taken from the US side. I went all along the side of the fence all the way to the water. And I realized here in Tecate, there was actually an interesting landscape because we could drive there and it's legal to do so. And on the other side, there's houses, but there was nothing here. So I went on the other side. And at first, I was like, okay, let me see which one is the closest house. And this one there looked like the closest. So I'm like, maybe I could build something on the house or close to the house. And so I went and ring the bell, and the woman, arrived, and there was, lots of dogs, a little kid playing, the grandparents, there was a whole family house there, chickens, and then she said, oh, and she looked at me and said, JR? And I go, I'm sorry? She said, no, I follow you on Instagram. I was like, are you sure? And so I went there, and I said, look, okay, it's my first time here. I'm actually looking for a place to do the artworks. Oh, yeah, of course, but you can take my back wall if you want. When I went there, it looks close, but it's actually pretty far. I was like, oh, thank you, but it won't work. But, so glad to meet you. I'm going to continue my journey. And on the way out, I say bye to the baby who was in the crib. I say bye to the family, and I go. And I keep driving. And then I keep coming back to that place. I'm like, I didn't find anything else like that. So I go to every neighbor, and I say, I'm sorry, but do you know whose land is this? And most of people answer was like, this. So I was like, okay, that's a good enough answer for me. It means it's not yours and it doesn't bother you. I'll take it. So what I did is, and really I can invite anybody to do it, is literally you go to, first of all, there's 2 steps to it. First, I came back to the woman and I say, I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but if I was to do a piece here, which I'm going to try, can I take your son in photo? And her son was 1.5 years, and he was in his crib. So I said, no, don't move him. And I just took a photo, and he was just holding his crib, just like that. And I just took that photo, and I said, look, if what I'm thinking of could work, I'll call you, and I'll explain you. Then, next step, very easy, you rent a caterpillar, and you dig. It's a very easy thing, because they'll rent you the caterpillar anywhere you are, and they'll deliver it to you wherever. You can actually do that anywhere. Maybe not DC, but anywhere else. They'll do it really easily. So we got the caterpillar, and we started to dig next to the border. Of course, it's a very high secured border. There's helicopters every 2 minutes. There's car passing there. But I was like, okay, if they stop us, then we'll say we're sorry, and we'll put the earth back. But it seemed to bother nobody. So we kept on digging until we flatten it. And then there's another step that's also very easy. You go and you rent a scaffolding. Those companies will rent you a scaffolding wherever you are. They'll just deliver it. So we say, we want it here. And we want it 3 times the size of the wall. And believe it or not, they were just like, okay, sure. If you pay, we'll build it. And same thing, I was like, okay, at what point those helicopters and those border patrol that are all over are going to come and say, this is forbidden. They didn't came. So when this was built, it looked that big. We put wood on top, and then we came and we pasted Kikito. You can see the house over there where he lives. And his mom, say, please use my son if it can, help change perspective on people living at the border. And we're actually living here. We're not trying to go anywhere else. We're actually super happy here. But he's 1.5 years. He have no idea what the border is. He's just, looking at it every day as the back of the garden. And so we pasted him there. And then we started cutting him out. But the most interesting view is when you go from the other side. And that's what you see. And so at that point, that's it. That was my idea. It was just to install it there, take a photo. And at that time, the Border Patrol didn't know it was me right behind them taking the photo. So that's the good thing about when I cross the border, I remove my hat and glasses. And so they don't recognize me. Actually, the Border Patrol, when I re-entered the US, was like, so what was the reason of your visit? And I say, well, it's tourism. And he said, well, what's your occupation? And I say, well, I'm an artist. And he said, oh, what kind of artist? I said, well, I do a bit of photography and stuff. He said, oh, have you seen, because as soon as it was up, it was already all over online. And he said, have you seen that piece of this kid overlooking the border? I said, no, I haven't seen it. He's like, yeah, it's everywhere. I said, oh, yeah, no, I've seen it online, but I haven't seen it real. Oh, yeah. He said, I think it's a French artist who did it. And I looked at him and was like, yeah, I think so. He's like, okay, have a good day. And so that's the beauty of it. But then one thing I didn't plan, because I posted on my Instagram, this is how to go and where to go to sit. And people really came from all over. And they just arrived there, and they took photos on either side. But what I didn't plan is that people will start talking through the wall and actually say, hey, oh, do you mind if I pass you my phone and you take a photo of us, and then I'll take your phone and I'll take a photo of you? I saw that on social media. The thing is, if you do that, you could be passing drugs or whatever, so you get arrested right away. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be a catastrophe because, maybe that project would lead to so many arrests. And then 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, people coming and coming. And I never heard of anyone getting arrested. So I'm like, this is very interesting because we stayed there, we looked. The Border Patrol are really doing their job. They're really there and they're controlling that whole area. I'm like, so how is that possible? So we decided, we're like, okay, on that side, because they couldn't have the same effect, this little piece of wood became very famous because people used it to make him look above. So we decided to come back, and we said, okay, this time, like any good finissage of an exhibition, you do a lunch, And so we were like, let's do a lunch at the border. And we tried to get permit. And maybe that was the thing we shouldn't have tried, but anyway. And we got a letter back from the Border Patrol and the government in place there that says, if you do it, we'll arrest everybody, we'll deport, we'll break the visa, like you can't obstruct the road, this is not a possibility. So we're on the Mexican side, I'm on the Mexican side, we actually built a table there with the eye of a woman who's a dreamer and who came there when she was 4 years old, and I photographed her next to San Francisco, and I told her, I'll put you on the table, but don't come. And she said, no, I want to come. I said, but it might not end up well. We don't know, so we're just going to try it. And not only she came, but she also took her mother, who's illegal, and they wanted to come. So they come on the US side. On the US side, I didn't put anything. And so there was people there. I just posted on Instagram, this is the last day to see Kikito. And so people came, but it's like 40, 50 people. When there was 40, 50 people, I passed a tarp through the wall, which is, it's like a flag you undo, which is the other side of the eye. And then we said, okay, we got to go very quick. Okay, you ready? We're going to make it look like it's a lunch, even if it's for 1 minute, that will be good enough. We send the drone up, and that's what you see. So the table is going through the wall. You have a music band that we split in two, 5 and 5 here, but they're playing the same music. Thank you. And we passed a lot of illegal tacos because the food was coming from here. So we were passing, we put all the plates on the ground, and then I'm like, okay, this is, they're gonna stop us in 5 minutes, so let's go quick. But then, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, no one comes. Where you can go and stay there, there'll be someone passing every 10 minutes, every 15. So I'm like, this is very strange. So we start to all sit and actually enjoying the moment. And after maybe an hour and a half, a Border Patrol car arrives, and it's just one guy comes out. So everybody freaks out, and I say, okay, just send him over to me. I'm on the Mexican side, so he can't get me anyway. And so I told him, I said, sir, do you want to have tea with me? Oh my God, thank you. Can you share tea with me? Sure. There you go. Salud. Thank you. And he was very kind, and he said, sure, I'll have tea with you. And he said, look, I'm not here to arrest you guys. I'm just saying, we've been watching you from the hills. My advice would be you don't continue for too long. And I was like, thank you. And a friend of mine was filming, and I say, sir, this is pretty special. Do you mind if, I use that video? And he was like, yeah, sure, you can use it. I'm like, no, I don't think you realize I don't want to put you in any trouble. You've been so kind to us. We see your name and your badge on there. I say, are you sure? He said, yeah, you can. So I say, do you mind giving me your number? And then, when all this is done, I write you. So I wrote him and I say, sir, are you really sure that I can post that video? Because I don't want to get you in trouble. And he said, no, please do. I'll take care of my trouble. You don't worry. And so I posted it. And it got seen millions of times. And actually, what was beautiful is, he didn't have that much oil for it, except on his account, he told me that there was a lot of hate because a lot of his colleagues and people, but we stayed friends. And he was so proud of that, his decision that day, that now he travels to see us. I was in Italy, I opened the show last month. He flew there with 2 other Border Patrol. And they were there, and they were like at the opening, And they would always stay on the side. And I say, guys, why do you stay on the side? I say, no, we don't belong here. We're just here to come say hi, but we don't know if we're allowed to be in this museum. I'm like, no, of course you're allowed. This is open, it's just you're welcome to be there. And we had an amazing discussion, and we stayed in touch since. He actually traveled to many more places. But it's amazing how that decision that they had defined so much of who he is now. He retired as a border patrol, but he goes and engages other of his colleagues that are still on the ground there. He gave me a piece of the wall on a plate with like it's like a prize or whatever of something of honor. I don't know how I feel about that, having a piece of the wall in my house, but it's very touching. And so of that project, I would have never imagined that, of something like that would happen, that he would not arrest us that day, and by not doing that, that it would give so much hope of what's possible and what's not. And that's actually the lines where I'm walking. I always walk in places where if the project have most risk of failing than success, that's where it's interesting. But of course, I could have told you a whole other story if this had gone wrong, and I would have learned from that, but I had to try to see if it was possible. And of course, on paper, it was not possible. But when you try it, there's the chance you meet someone like him. That's another project where I just, prison is a place that I was not keen to walk too much in, maybe because I almost end up there so many times, but also because it's so much paperwork. And so a friend of mine told me one day, you should do a project in a prison. And I was like, you know what, thank you, but no thank you. But when it's a friend, you can't really hang up the phone. And so he said, yes, it would be so good. I said, no, it's not the question. It's just, I'm not ready to do all this paperwork and all this. It's just not for me. And he said, but what would you do if you could do something in a prison? And really, I told him that just so he'd never call me back. I said, I would paste the entire prison. I'm like, okay, with that, good luck with that. He hung up the phone and he called a guy who works in Los Angeles and in films, but also with prison system. And the guy was like, then he told him, I spoke to JR, he wants to do a project in prison. And he was like, oh yeah, really? Oh, good, let me call the governor. So the guy called the governor and goes like, I'm sorry, wait, who are you? Yeah, this is Scott, you remember I met you? Yeah, sure, well, what can I do for you? Well, I'm trying to get this artist, JR, and it's like, I'm sorry, I don't know that artist, but thank you. Can you go to my office? And it's like, no, but he does those black and white portraits and record the stories. And then the governor was like, wait, before I was a governor, I was in a mural where there was 1,300 people. This is actually just one section. And the before governor, that's him over there, he was there. He was in the mural, Gavin Newsom. And I didn't remember because I photographed him as part of it. So he said, I remember that process. And he recorded my story that was at MoMA in San Francisco. He said, give him full permission for any prison in the state of California. So my friend do call me back 3 years later and say, you have full permission. So I'm like, what? I'm sorry, I've never been to a prison in California. So I start looking on Google Earth, but I say, it doesn't work. They all have yard in grass, and I cannot paste on grass. I need concrete. So I keep looking, and I'm like, no, it's sand. It doesn't work. And then I keep looking. It doesn't work. And then I found this one, and I'm like, wait, this sounds interesting. What is that yard? And I look at this one. It's Tehachapi, it's called. And I see all this is concrete, the basketball and so that's all in the same morning. I call back the guy, and then we all go on the WhatsApp. I say, okay, I found this one. Yeah, this I could do somewhere. It's like, this is Tehachapi. It's a super max. And I say, I don't know. I'm from France. I don't know what that means. It's like, well, there's different levels, and this is the super max. But he said also it's, there's where they have people in cages still, And so it's just like one of the worst prisons in the US. It's actually ranked in top 5 worst prison. And so I go, all right, let's go. That sounds like an invitation. So I didn't really believe that, we could do something. And so I sent the next day 2 friends of mine that live in Los Angeles. And I say, guys, they work with me a lot on projects. And I say, just take your day, go to Tehachapi, and take your ID with you. Just give me, I'll just give them your name, and just try. Come with the drones, the camera. Just pretend you want to do a full scout of the thing, and tell me if they let you. So then I say, are you sure you don't have a paper or something we can show? I say, I have nothing. I'm just going to WhatsApp your 2 names, and then you tell me. If that doesn't work, I'm not going to fly. And then they say, okay. And then I don't hear from them. Then The next day, end of day, they finally reconnect their phone, and they said it was the craziest thing ever. We walk in there, it's the army running the prison, and they were like, what do you want? And we said, well, we want to go to the roof. They said, well, you know, the roof have electric fence, but sure, we'll turn it down, you can go. The next thing they say, we want to put our drone up. And then they say, yeah, you can try, but there's geofencing, but you know, sure, you can try to send your drone. We want to see that yard, this yard. They say, yeah, sure, follow us, we'll empty the yard. And then they called me back, they said, you have to come here, it's really weird. I don't know what permit you have here, but they would do anything. So I flew back there and I arrived and they had gathered 50 inmates. And when I arrived in that room, I sat down and I just, you know, I was a bit intimidated. I had an idea in mind. I didn't know if it makes sense. This was just 3 days after that first WhatsApp. So I walk in this room and I start explaining what I do. And I show them, you know, the projects and the stuff I do. And there was long silence. You know, it was not like an animated conversation. Maybe from my side, but not from the other side. And I realized in this project, there's never been even a screening of a movie, nothing. They're just like nothing. And around the table is people from different gangs, and you know, I get a bit intimidated, but I told them, okay, this is the project I want to do. I want to make the yarn like if it's a hole, and you guys are in the hole looking up. But I don't want to put only you. I want to put the guards, and we were surrounded by guards in army with, you know, weapons. And I was like, I would love to put the guards, and the guards were like, oh, we're not part of this, you know, just keep going. And so I said, well, so if I can, the guards, and then also some victims on the other side that I will go and find. Maybe not your victims, but, you know, maybe victim from your gang. So they were listening very quietly. But I said, before we continue, if anyone around this table have some victims on the other side that this may offend, that they see you in this project, if I were you, I would not be in this project. For you, for the group, for me. And 6 or 7 stood up and left the room. And the others say, no, we're here, it's all gang-related, it's all because of crime in prison, it's all because of the 3 strikes. So, you know, when you do 3 minor crime when you're a kid. So a lot of the guys that they had selected internally were in prison since they were 14, 15, 17. And then they took life without parole, or sometimes they went in and then in prison took a longer sentence. And so I photographed them, but I told them, look, the photography, it just takes me 2 minutes. That's not really what I do. I'm not a photographer. But you're going to go in this other room over there, and I've led a microphone, and I want you to sit there and tell your whole story. And tell it like if you're telling it to me, but I won't be in the room with you because it's not an interview. I'm not questioning you. You tell it how you want to tell it. But remember, there's a French guy like me or someone else around, you know, that's going to listen to this and have no idea that this place in the middle of the desert even exists. So please explain it from when you were a child up to now. How do you came to this? And they started recording their story, and some of them would stay there for 30, 40 minutes. And then we went back to New York. We started printing the image. And it was like 800 or 1,000 strips of paper to do it. And we had to go back in the prison and this time bring all like the brush, the bucket to paste the actual yard. I could not believe that they were actually going to let us do that. Because in prison like that, the guards are normally not in the yard. They only stay in the watchtower. And the only way they intervene in the yard is when everybody's on the ground. If not, they shoot until everybody's on the ground. So it's a very complicated context, and I've never seen that. And so we pasted, and everybody, all gangs together pasting, and that was the most powerful part. And I thought I had planned actually 2 days to do it, and in a couple hours, it was almost done. I had to slow down. If not, they would put everyone back in cells. And so when all the portraits were pasted, we took the time, and it was all those little moments in between that was the most powerful. Like the guards, finally, who did accept it, some of them accepted to be in the image, but to make them paste, I had to stop the pasting for 1 hour because never in a maximum security they can be that close. They never they never talk to each other. It's really, even in their audio, the guards would say they are animals, but they didn't say it like it's a secret. That's the way they see them. It's just totally normal for them. So to just get to that was really insane. And one of the singles is that I was allowed to have my phone in there, which never happened. It's just because of that full permission. I had my phone and I had data, so I could actually do it and post online as I was doing it. So this guy, one day I post him, and the next day he said, "Oh, my family saw me, but please, I want to show them my diplomas or what I've done." They started realizing, like, the image they were sending outside. And they were like, "Oh, I can actually have an impact of that. I don't want them to see me with my tattoo, which is what I was before, but I can't remove them." And so I met this guy, Kevin, had a swastika on his face. And that was actually a photo I took the first day. And I never saw someone with a swastika on his face. And I had to ask him, I say, why do you have this on your face? And he almost went like he forgot about it. He was like, "Oh, this was when I was in the gang, and I just got brainwashed, and I went deep in there, and I strongly believed in it, and then I came back from it, but now I'm stuck with this tattoo anyway." So I was like, "Oh, okay, so you want to remove it?" He said, "Oh yeah, I will remove it. It's just you can't do it in prison." I posted that image, and you can imagine on social media, a lot of people are going, "Oh, this is a call for hate," or this and that. I go back to him that same day, and I said, "Kevin, I forgot to tell you, how many years you've been here?" He said, 16. Like, there's a little invention that had happened on the other side of the world. Since it's called social media. It's like you post something and everyone can react to it. I posted your image, and of course it created a lot of debate. "Do you mind answering those people?" I say, "Sure." And I started doing those conversations with him that I would post, where people could ask questions and he would answer. And it was very interesting because, the first video, he went a bit deeper. And maybe we convinced 50-60% of people who were like, "Oh, wow." When you hear him talk, you're like, "Okay." Some people say, "I believe in that guy. Looks like he have changed." And they say, "I'll help you. If you need to remove it, let's do a Kickstarter, whatever, we'll help you remove it." And I would read that to him, and he was like, "Really? That person, like some, Marco 21260 say he loved me? That's insane." They would see the little heart and the little emoji, and they've never had any feedback from anywhere. And then more people would say, no, this is not enough. He can't get away with this. And so I would record him. And it was really amazing to see how he had to put his thoughts together. And for the first time, he realized also how this offended people, because he'd never been in the outside with this. And then when the image was finished, we actually sent a drone. But no one have ever seen a drone there, because you can't fly above those prisons with drones. And so they had to take off the geofencing, so we could actually see it. And this image could only be seen with a drone, and we would then decide when to reveal it, because even in the prison, it was so big that you couldn't see it. And to me, the idea was not necessarily just about the image, but it was about the fact that you could listen to the story of each one of them. So what it looked like is this. And then if you zoom in, you do actually see them walking on it. Those are the tables, you have the basketball, playground that's still there. You have victims, guards, inmates. And then what we did is we created this app that is totally free. It's called JR Murals. And you can go inside, like the murals I showed you before with the governor also, you can click on every one. You click and you go on for like a story from 3 minutes to 40 minutes, whatever they wanted to share. And what happened when when we shared it is just, I didn't do any press. I just posted on my Instagram, and then I let it spread. And it was very interesting because the only way I could have feedback from them was to go back there. So I invented a project. I said, I need to go back there. I have another idea. And so we went back there, and I said, okay, what is this idea actually you want to do on the walls? I said, well, it's very simple. Behind those walls is mountains. So if you take a distance up, the walls disappeared, and now the mountain continues on the walls. And it's actually still there now in the prison. But I went back to those inmates, and I say, guys, did you hear about what was the impact here? I couldn't reach any of you. Oh, they say it's very simple. They say, my daughter never visited me in 30 years. And now she heard my story at home, and she decided to visit me, and now she comes every week. And he said, you ask any of us, and this is what happened for us. It's just suddenly the perception of the guards, the perception of the warden, the perception of our own family, have totally changed on us. And even the people in the prison understood the power of what that image is doing on the outside. And so this was maybe 2 years ago. We've been working on this for 4 years and keep coming back. And you believe it or not, is because we're allowed to actually shake hands and hug, till this day, what moved them the most, sometimes most of those guys come and say goodbye 4 times. I know they already did it a minute ago, but it's just the only moment that they actually can feel another human being. And Kevin was actually one of the first one to be freed from that project. And I went to pick him up. This was on his last days in the prison. And we actually brought him a book from Maus. Art Spiegelman did this book about the Holocaust, about the story of his family. And he signed it for Kevin, because he also saw him on social media, and he said, that kid, is worth better. And he signed him the book. We brought the book to Kevin, and he read it that night. He was still in prison. And he called us the next morning, and he said, wow, I called my mom after I read this. I was so moved, and I told her, and she said, but you stupid moron, we had family in Poland, and your grandfather's brother died in Auschwitz because he was saving Jews, and you go in there and you put this swastika on your face. And then it was the day he got out, and we, went to take him that day, and he, as he promised, he said, that's the first thing I want to do is remove this tattoo. And so right before we left the jail, he wanted to go up the mountains, because that was a point of view where he could see. For 16 years or 17 years, he had seen that mountains, and he just wanted to go on top of the rock to see back at the prison where he had stayed out for so long. And when we took him to the doctor, it was actually at the end of the first session, because it was a lot of session, the doctor removed her mask and said, well, who's better than a Jewish doctor to remove your tattoo? And that project, actually, now that it's been almost 4 years, 50% of the inmates that were in this project got freed, even if they had life without parole. Why? Because what happened is that even if they changed, like Kevin, no one would notice. They're still stuck with their tattoos, they're still stuck in there. Some of them have even served 20 years, but no one will notice it, because they have no way of anyone noticing that they actually have changed. And the only reason why they could actually go out is because that relation that started with the guards, where they started to say hello, or when they were pasting, and they say, oh, sorry, guards, you're careful here. And on little, stupid things, they would actually communicate during the pasting. That conversation continued after. When they would see each other, they could not say hello. And then those guards started to listen to their story and realize, oh, okay, I hear your story. I heard why you're here. I hear a bit more about you. And then when those guys went to board, because they go to board every whatever, they asked the guard, hey, do you mind putting a little word for me? Because, you're the only one that actually witnessing how I'm doing. And because of those words that the guards have done to those guys, they've been freed one after the other. 100% of them got moved to level 3, level 2, level 4 being the worst, where I met them all. And so their life have changed, but 50% of them, even some that had without parole, got freed. So this is one of the projects I wanted to show you, because that's the only one where we could have, we could really measure, it precisely, because if not, we're doing it such in Brazil or in places, even if you work for 20 years in the same community, you cannot measure as well as you do in prison. So when people ask me, can art change the world, sometimes I'm like, maybe. Thank you. Thank you all.
One of the things that we talked about when we were preparing for tonight that I was struck with was that you said that you were a storyteller. But I think what really comes across with your work when you speak about it is the humanity, the human connections that your art kind of achieves. It's bringing people together across borders, between fences. Can you talk about how you came to think of your art and the potential for it in relation to this sense of humanity?
Well, really early I realized that the process was the best part. And so I always make sure it's the most complicated process so that it involves the most people. And then once I understood that recipe of okay, that's where the art is actually, then what I started to really enjoy is walking in the same place for years. So in that community where I showed you, where I took my friend taking his camera, like again, I've worked there for the last 20 years. And until they actually destroyed the entire neighborhood, the whole buildings. So it's this long process within community, or like in Brazil, where you can actually then measure the impact of art and see how it actually reconnect people. You know, the mayor that sued me, 15 years later, so 5 years ago, I did a mural like where I depict the whole community. And I invited him as anyone else because I didn't want to be like, oh, this is only going to be my friends. And he said yes. He was part of the mural, and which was very interesting. And then the mural was exhibited at the Palais Tokyo in Paris. And at the opening, we invited, of course, the whole community from that neighborhood and the mayor too. And the mural actually depicts the riot also. It tells about, so it's the story of France. So the French president came, at the time was François Hollande. And when he walked in, he looked and he was like, oh, wow, that's like, you know, this is part of our history. And so everybody kind of introduced themselves in the mural. They said, I'm here, I'm there. And they explained why and how they decided to be depicted this way. And then came the mayor. And it was like, woo. And he said, well, you know, let him speak. And then and I told the president, I said, well, he actually sued me when I was a kid. So now, you know, it's kind of interesting that we're here. And so the president looked at him and said, well, if you give him a wall in the neighborhood and let's make it permanent, I'll come and inaugurate it. And so 3 months later, the president came in that neighborhood and declared that a French monument. Mm. What was very interesting, it was the first time that people from second-generation immigrants like me that lives in this neighborhood were part of any monument in France. Yeah. And so, to me, all those parts of the process are very important. Why? Because they gather people, either in the making, either in the conversation, and all the way up to the inauguration of the mural, where the mayor also tried to speak, but people booed so much that he couldn't even say a word. So we actually came on stage and say, hey guys, just okay, we all know that he did nothing for this neighborhood, but now we're all here, let's hear what he has to say. And the mayor actually apologized for never doing anything. And it was actually very moving. There was no clapping or there was no hugging, but just people were like, oh, okay, wow. You know, he did that move, he apologized. He recognized that he didn't do much. Mm-hmm. And I would have never believed that one day, you know, like a door would open between, you know, what was for me just, you know, something just impossible, just two worlds. So I think since then, I don't put any border into anything I do. I just think, okay, the more interaction there'll be and the more possibility there'll be.
So talk about social media, because you mentioned it as a way of connecting to people, but also reaching out to people who sometimes help in the creation of your work as collaborators. So do you think your work could have been achieved in the same way without social media?
Well, you know, before social media, on my website, I would have a map of the world and I would say, please, if you can help in any way, put yourself on the map, and I would see where there would be the strongest community around the world. And then I would reach out, and it was through email. So people would say, I'm here, Texas, I have a wall. Or I'm here saying I'm ready to paste. And then we would actually see in Pakistan and this and that, wherever there was a large group, and we would contact, and each time I would travel, I would gather those people. So even before social media, there was a way. Social media made it so much easier for me, but I always made sure that it stayed something where we met in a place, or where you want to go and drive to the border, and that it's actually easy. So people didn't come to speak to people at the border. They came because they wanted to take a selfie in front of Kikito. But then were surprised by the fact that, oh, actually, there was an interaction happening. I think that's the thing that is always part of my work, is that you want to go there because you're curious, you want to see, and it's like, it looks like fun, and then suddenly you're like, oh, wow, you're actually discovering a situation you would have never been aware of. And so I always push people to travel and go to see with their own eyes.
You speak with such ease and sometimes even humor about trying to do a project, even in sometimes the most complex of circumstances. Can you talk about a project that maybe didn't turn out how you wanted, or even didn't even happen because of it?
Didn't happen. I mean, there's many, but one I can remember was North Korea. But I mean, yeah, you would have guessed it.
Maybe one day.
I went there. I did went there. I had to make fake papers, and I entered like a marketing consultant for like a firm in Switzerland. And they refused me once, and then the second time they approved me. Many people actually in DC told me, maybe they approved you to like lock you. I was like, well, there's only one way to know. And so I went there, and then I stayed in this tourist group, you know, because you can only go with groups.
Official.
Yeah, official. And I pasted actually a sticker the size of half of my little finger. And I felt so, you know, great. That was
radical.
The only thing I could do. Then I was like, okay, there's, you know, it's not much more possible. But, you know, I wanted to go and see with my own eyes. And many places, it didn't turn out, you know, it was always complicated. Or I get arrested or deported or like, you know, it makes it very hard. But the thing is, either I switch, I continue, I come back. We always try to find a way. You know, at the end, it's just paper and glue. But it's easier for me as a foreigner to do it in many places. And when it should be done by locals only, then most of the time, that's what happened. I created this project in 2011 where I said, look, if there's a project that really matters to you and you think that art could help, send me the portraits. I'll print them. And I'll ship them to you for free wherever you are in the world. And you can paste them. Mm-hmm. And it's your project. And we've sent 500,000 posters. And those posters have been pasted by people. And I've never, you know, I've seen them because I've traveled and I've seen some of them. But as we speak now, people are pasting their posters in school, in different countries for different reasons. But it's a way of saying, I'm here, I exist. And they don't need me to do so. So I've decided to open my practice to anyone who wants to do it.
So my final...
Thank
you. My last question is really about your work in the Ukraine, because that is ongoing. It's still, you know, being shown all around Europe. So tell the audience about that project.
I mean, I live in Paris also, and it was the first time that a war exploded so close for me that I could drive there. And so I remember the first week, you know, I was like anyone else in the world. You're kind of like, well, you know, what can we do? What can I do? And we're just watching the news. And after a week, I was actually in the Middle East, and I received more and more messages on social media of people saying, why don't you do anything? And I'm like, but what do you want me to do? I'm like, I'm really speechless. I'm like, and they say, well, why don't you post about it? I'm like, well, I mean, it's all over the news. I don't know what I could post. And one day an artist wrote to me from Ukraine, and he tells me the same thing. And I'm like, look, if you have a drawing or something, I'll post it. And he said, no, I don't really have one now, but I'm sure you can do something. And I said, well, let's just jump on a call because I want to understand. And we spoke, and I said, but in a moment of war like that, you think art can, you know, is needed? I don't know. And he said, oh yeah, 100% is needed. And you know, like more than ever. And I said, oh, really? I mean, okay. And he said, look, you should speak to this guy. He's at the border right now. He's French-Ukrainian. And, you know, just speak to him. He's helping people passing. And so he gave me his number, WhatsApp him. The guy said, well, wait a second, I call you. And then he calls me, and he's like FaceTime me like that. And I said, where are you? He's like, no, I've just passed back. I'm in Poland. I just crossed the border. I said, oh, wait, so you just cross the border and then come back? He said, yeah, you can do it easily. You enter Ukraine. There's no line. Nobody wants to go this way. And he said, but to get out, he said, sometimes I have to wait, you know, long hours. So I said, okay. And what'd you do? He said, no, I'm just, you know, I have a van, so I just drive people who need to go to different cities. And, you know, he said, I'm just trying to help it. And I said, what do you see around you? He said, oh, I see women and children. That's all. It's only women and children. And then he showed me, and I see some kids playing, you know, and they're like just running around and playing. And I said, wow, you know, he said, yeah, you know, kids just play. And I said, oh, do you mind we hang up and can you take photos of some kids you see around you? And he said, okay, just hold a second. We hang up, and like an hour after, he sent me some photos, just, you know, iPhone photos of just kids running. There was a little girl running like that, super happy. And I said, whoa, is that little girl still close by? And he said, well, oh, this one, let me see. Oh, yeah, she's sitting over there with her mother. I said, do you mind going to her mother and asking her if if you can explain to her my work, I'm going to send you some photos on WhatsApp and ask her if she'd be okay that I enlarge her daughter. And so, first of all, she was like, no, he told me, look, she's not sure if it's safe. And she said she's going to call her husband first, and then we're going to call you back. Took a couple hours, and they called me back, and then the whole family discussed, and they said, yes, sure, she's happy to sign a waiver, and her daughter is called Valeria. I was like, okay. And I told him, I said, okay, so you say I can cross the border like that, I can walk. He said, oh yeah, you can walk in, but I would not advise you to drive in. You should drive and then leave your car and then find other mode of transportation on the other side. And so I connected with other people there, and I said, okay, I can't paste because in the middle of the war, I can't do a giant pasting. What we could do is print on a tarp and roll that tarp. And so we printed a tarp that's 150 feet long. It's like longer than it's like huge. We rolled it, and when you roll it, it becomes like this massive roll, but we put it in a van and we drove it there. And then we crossed the border with the actual tarp on a trolley like that. And we crossed, and the border patrol there in the costume, they were like, you're going this way? We're like, yeah. Like, sure. Boom, they give you a stamp, and then, you go in. And then you get there, and, it's a bit of chaotic. And then I had connected with some people, and they say, yes, let's, we'll drive you to the biggest city on the west side called Lviv. And so we go in this van with all those young people, and then we start driving. And for 2 hours, and there was not much people going that way. It was mainly lots of people getting out, so lots of traffic the other way. And we arrived in that city, and I told them a couple of days ago, I said, I need to gather at least 400 or 500 people to enlarge this. It's a big one. And they say, we don't have 400 or 500, but we have maybe 200 or 300 people, because, we have to trust every single person that there's no spy, there's no this, we have. So I was like, okay, I haven't thought of that. He said, no, but don't worry, we reached out to people, but we got on that square that I scouted on Google Earth, and when I got on the square, there was nobody, And I was like, how is there going to be 200 people in 15 minutes, So I told my team, I was like, oh gosh, okay, let's find coffee. I think it's going to be a long day. But actually, 15 minutes later, 200 people showed up. And I was like, oh, wow. So I was like, okay. So I just got everyone. I said, okay, when we unroll this, is this image of this little girl. Everyone have to stand around and open it like a giant tarp, and then we'll send a drone, which was the most complicated thing to do. Sending a drone in the war, you see every position. So that was the only thing where we had to have a special permit. But when I opened it, it didn't look as strong as I thought. So I'm like, okay, gosh, I said, we got to move location. And the guy's like, what do you mean? He's like, let's move everybody somewhere else. What do you have? He's like, no, you can't go anywhere here. It's like, the cities, there was an attack close by this morning. And I go, okay, show me. So we go on Google Earth again and say, look, there's the opera place. It's a big place, a big square, but there's a lot of people there. They say, okay, let's try it. It might be too big, but let's see. And if you put the projector back, I have an image that I can show you of it. And we went on the actual square of the opera, and I'll show you. I have the image if it goes back on.
Yeah, just pulling it up.
And so we opened it all together, and it was incredible because many more people came and helped, like children, soldiers, whoever was there on the square came and helped. And then we got to like 400 people. And after that, they walked with the image through the city. Then we rolled it, and we got it out of the country, the tarp. And going out was the most complicated part. That's where the war really hits you, because you're in line with women and children, and sometimes men that were alone with their children, but when they got to the end of the line, they wouldn't let them go out. So you assist to that was really where it hit me. The rest we were in the action of doing things, and really like leaving the country was the hardest thing. And then we actually realized, okay, what do we do with this banner now? And it got to the cover of Time magazine 2 days later. And then after that, we kind of make a call of people in different cities who want to open it. And all over Europe, people started to opening the banner. So we would send it, and people every week would open in a different city. And so I called the people in Ukraine, and I say, hey, how can we help? How can we turn this into something that actually help you more? And they say, no, what we need the most is attention, that it doesn't disappear from the news. Because even here in certain part of the country, they don't speak about the war anymore because it doesn't happen there. So imagine in your place, we're going to end up at the bottom of the news at some point. And so I've never thought that actually art was so needed. And of course we did then, we started sending trucks because we sold an NFT of that image and we raised a lot of money, and we sent every week for months a truck filled with a list of goods and things that they would need. And same thing through social media. We found someone that had a company of drivers of trucks that were from Ukraine actually and Poland. And so they say, we'll do it for free. We'll drive you a truck a week for free. And we started this connection. And so this image then, really became like a national thing. So, if not through, Instagram, you can find it. Or if you put Jerry Ukraine on Google, you'll find it in a better quality maybe than...
Yeah.
But it's out there.
Yeah. So as we find the image to show you, I did want to open up the house for questions. I think we have time for one or two. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hands. We have first one up here. Amy. Yeah. The mic is coming.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Merci beaucoup pour représenter la France.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for representing France, but also for opening dialogues, worldwide dialogues on very important political issues and so forth. But my question was, could you talk a little bit more about your project in France with new artists and how you develop that? And I think the question that everybody wants to know is, when are we going to see your work here?
Oh, wait, I'll just show that image and I'll answer a question. So as you see, people are all around the banner, right? And if you go on my Instagram, you'll see people close all together, and then we say 1, 2, 3, and they open the image, and then you see it fly over the wind. So then after we went in lots of different places around the world where kids are also being victims of conflict. So this is in Rwanda. We went in Mauritania also. Lots of places in the desert where basically kids are impacted by a conflict that is happening around them. And then each time we would create those sharing picnic. This is the furthest refugee camp in the world. It's at the further end of Mauritania next to Mali. And so I wanted to continue after that project in different locations. This was in Venezuela. But to answer your question, and then at the end, actually, what people didn't know is when you gather all the image, like this was in Lesbos, a little girl from Afghanistan, we gathered them all together and it looked like they're running together. So they were all shot in the exact position to actually look like they actually play together. And this was in Italy, in Torino, 2 months ago. So in Paris, I did a project where, in the neighborhood where I started, the one I was talking about, we started a school, but I did an art school not to teach how to take a good photography or how to, do a great painting. It was an art school, but how to survive as an artist. And I took each year 13 students, and I took them through the process of how to make a PDF, how to present your work, how to, even make your Instagram, like all the stuff of how to survive, how to actually, work on a project from beginning to end, self-finance yourself. Because I don't work with brands, I don't take corporate money. I have a very strict rule of how my work should be financed. And so I didn't impose that on the kids. Thank you. But I told them, there is a possibility, I don't come from money, but I just never wanted to let any branding put their logo on my work, so I've never accepted. And so at the end, it was very tough for the kids because they were like, yeah, but it's easy for you to say so now that you have this success or this. And then at the very end of the first year, I managed to get the Palais de Tokyo, this museum, to give them a show. And I told them, okay, last advice. stay next to your work during the whole duration of the show, because you can, because you're still young, and just stay next to your work. You won't be able to do that maybe later. Just all your friends gonna party outside, it's gonna be the coolest show, whatever. Stay next to your work and talk to people. And most of them did, and actually now I can say, because it's been a couple of years, and a lot of them live as artists. I received a message today from one of the artists, and she told me, I have a show in Brussels, a show in London. A lot of them got bought by collections, entered in museums, signed by gallery. And it was very interesting because it was not much. They already had the talent. I didn't, bring them any talent. They just never had anyone to explain them, how to survive as an artist. And so it was a very interesting project. I did it mainly during COVID and after, because I was there, and I realized I couldn't just appoint teachers to do it. I wanted to have that connection. So since then, I followed those students that I had at the time, and I kept a great relation with them.
Well, we're at time, and I'm very sorry to say that, because I feel like we could keep this conversation going all night. What I would say...
I spoke too much, I'm sorry.
What I would say is that we all know that JR's on Instagram, so message him. But please join me in congratulating and thanking JR for an amazing evening.